don't typically do unboxings on this channel, but in the case of this pedal, I took good care of the packaging over the last few weeks so I could eventually get these shots. I don't know that I've ever had such a premium experience opening an audio product of any cost. Pull the pedal out of its foam bed, and the sense of quality is heightened even further with a heft and build beyond anything I've experienced in an effects pedal. This is all very Apple, all the way down to the designed in California verbiage. And as with Apple, the premium feel comes with a premium price. Today, we'll find out if the sound of this pedal can match the quality of the build. I'm Donald Jordan for Bloom Music, and this is the Universal Audio Golden Reverberator. The Golden crams 3 of UA's pristine, true stereo reverb algorithms into a portable pedal chassis. We'll cover each of those 3 reverbs in depth, but first, we'll look at the controls. The Golden sports 6 knobs, 3 toggle switches, and 2 foot switches. The top 3 knobs are pretty straightforward, allowing you to dial in your decay time, pre-delay time, and wet-dry mix as expected. Along the bottom row, you have the bass and treble knobs, which allow you to control your low and high-end frequency content, and then there is the mod knob, which we'll use to dial in your modulation settings. Between the knobs live 3 toggle switches. The leftmost switch allows you to switch between the 3 different reverbs. On the opposite side, another switch allows you to switch between 3 different variations of each reverb model, labeled A, B, and C. In the middle, a final switch allows you to store a single preset. To finish off the face of the pedal, there are 2 foot switches, one to turn the effect on and off, and another to switch between the currently active reverb and the one preset. Around back, you've got dual inputs and outputs for true stereo operation, as well as a USB-C port for firmware updates and a sync button to pair the pedal to your phone for communication with the UAFX Control mobile app. Now let's take a deep dive into each of the 3 reverb models. UA's Spring 65 captures the bounce and drip of classic in-amp spring reverbs. Though spring might not be the first thing that comes to mind when you think of a synth reverb, it can be a glorious effect on certain patches. Usually when people talk about the quality of spring reverb emulations, it's in the context of guitar, where the reverb is judged on the realism of the way that the spring responds to the picking and dynamics of the player. With synth, however, the character of the sustain is much more important. Meaning, does the reverb blend organically rather than sounding like an obvious separate effect? Do the resonances of the spring enhance rather than overwhelm your sound? It's in these ways that the Spring 65 is excellent as a reverb for synth. In spring mode, the 3 variations represent 3 different styles of tanks, with the trails and resonances focusing on different bands of the frequency spectrum. Variation A accentuates high frequencies, B the mids, and C the lows. These are not simple filters, but 3 unique emulations where the drips and feedback of the spring responds differently to different frequencies. After some use, you can start to predict which variation will sound best on a particular patch based on the frequency content, and I found that there was always a variation that I preferred that blended just right with my sound. To tailor that blend even further, you can use the bass and treble shelving filters to really dial in the tone of the reverb until it meshes perfectly with your sound. The decay knob works in a unique way compared to the other reverbs in the pedal. Rather than using a continuously variable decay time, UA opted to go for realism, instead allowing you to choose between 3 tank sizes: small, normal, and large. Turning the knob toggles between these 3 sizes. The Spring 65 algorithm has a final trick up its sleeve. Rather than using a typical reverb modulation effect, which wouldn't really make sense in a Spring emulation, UA instead opted to add tape, wow, and flutter, borrowed from the EP3 effect of the Starlight Echo Station. I really like this effect. It adds a unique lushness to the Spring reverb. Not only does the effect sound great, it's also an instant stereoizer, since the left and right channels do their wowing and fluttering independently. You can essentially treat the modulation like a wideness knob, and it'll get nice and wide before the modulation gets too unreasonable. If you want the melted tape sound, it'll go there too. To my delight as a lo-fi junkie, I found that the wow and flutter revealed a final trick: straight up lo-fi tape emulation. Try these settings. Put the decay on the shortest setting, and turn pre-delay all the way down. Put the mix full wet, and turn your bass all the way up, and your treble all the way down. Now, as you turn your mod knob, you get a more and more broken tape machine. It works best on pads where the reverb itself is less apparent, but I was happy to find this kind of hack that gave me a bonus convincing lo-fi effect. UA's EMT-140 has been one of my go-to mixing reverb for years, so I was happy to hear that familiar sound in the pedal format. If you're accustomed to the sound of the UA-140 plate, you will instantly be at home. I tend to use the 140 as a mix effect rather than a creative effect, but in contrast to the Spring, which worked well on a lot of sounds but not great on some, the 140 sounds good on everything. You simply will not find a synth sound that it can't complement. Whether it's staccato plucks, or evolving pads, or anything in between, the Plate 140 will enhance your patch. know I'm bordering on fanboyism here, but there's a reason that UA's 140 has been the plate reverb algorithm for more than a decade. It's just excellent. In Plate 140 mode, the controls all work as you'd expect, no surprises here, and all the knobs function as the labels suggest. In this mode, the variations represent different plates. A brighter, shorter plate, a longer, darker plate, and then a more neutral, long plate in the third slot. The one control that functions differently than anticipated is the mod knob. Rather than impart the typical pitch modulation you'd expect, it does more of a smear and thicken effect. It is affecting the pitch, but it's very subtle, nowhere near the wobbles you'll get with the other two reverb types. The Hall 224 is another classic UA effect now presented in the pedal format. Here, you can expect the same sheen and lush character you've heard on countless records. The 224 really is at home on synthesizers. It's like peanut butter and jelly. The use of the original Lexicon 224 and the emergence of synthesizers as a mainstay of popular music followed a similar trajectory in the 80s, so naturally, synths and 224 are well acquainted. The 224 is great because it's equally useful as a mix effect and a creative effect. Want a subtle sheen that tucks in perfectly? Check. Want a wash of color that gives animation and depth to an otherwise lifeless patch? Check. In 224 mode, the controls of the Golden act very differently than the other modes to mimic the control scheme of Lexicon's original Lark controller. Thankfully, however, the knob label still makes sense despite the unique functionality. Rather than having a single decay control, there are different decay lengths for different frequency bands. The main decay knob controls the middle band and acts as the master decay and scales the other controls. From there, the bass knob controls the decay time of the lower frequencies, while the treble knob controls the decay time of the upper frequencies. All three knobs are interactive. Changing the treble decay length affects the bass tail and vice versa. Likewise, turning the main decay knob affects the other two. This may be counterintuitive at first, but it gives an organic, reactive quality to the reverb and provides an incredible amount of control over the density and harmonic content of your reverb trails. It can do bright, shimmery washes, dark, murky sludge, and everything between. The reverb lengths can go stupid long and will self-oscillate into oblivion at high settings. And then of course you can thicken up and add movement to the tails with the modulation knob. It can go into wonky territory, but I almost always preferred it at subtler settings. In 224 mode, the variation toggle switches between three different spaces, mainstays from the original unit: Room A, Small Hall A, and Large Hall B. Room is a shorter, denser reverb with a wide stage. Hall A is a brighter reverb with longer, dynamic tails. And the classic Hall B is the long, washy reverb of Lore. All three variations are excellent and useful for different aesthetics. Just some other random observations I made while reviewing the unit. This thing must be doing some work because it puts off some heat. It doesn't get super hot or anything, but it does get warm to the touch after putting it through its paces. I can't recall any of my other pedals doing that, digital or analog. It's not anything I'm concerned about, it was just a funny surprise to feel the heat from the DSP breaking a sweat in there. There's a crazy feature that almost seems like an afterthought in the promotional materials. It gets second to last billing on the feature list of the product page, but it had to have a significant impact on the price of the pedal. The Golden runs what the marketing speak calls dual engine processing, which basically means there are two full instances of the pedal inside running in parallel at the same time. One handles the reverb that is currently active on the panel, and the other runs the preset. What this means is that when you switch between the preset reverb and the panel reverb, you get tails for both. So you could do something like create a drone with the 224, then switch over to the spring and play through it while the 224 drone continues on. guess that's cool, but I'm left wondering, could it have just been a single engine reverb and cost significantly less? Is there really a lot of people out there dynamically switching reverb types mid-song and needing tails for that? That just seems like such an oddly specific feature that I can't imagine being very useful for a lot of people. And it had to have had a huge impact on the cost, right? Anyways, I thought it was an interesting quirk worth mentioning. Or maybe I'm just missing the point. Let me know in the comments if you can think of interesting or creative ways this could be used. I want to reiterate again how nice of a piece of gear this is. The body looks to be machined out of a single piece of aluminum. Again, very Apple. Pictures don't do it justice. This is a beautiful piece of kit. I'll go over a few minor annoyances. Tragically missing in the 224 mode is a crossover control. On the original Lexicon 224, you could manually adjust the split point between the bass and mid frequencies for precise control over the low end of the reverb. Here, that split point is predetermined. UA has made sure to select good static crossover points, and I thought about it a lot and couldn't determine an existing function I'd want to trade for it, but its absence is a shame nonetheless if you're familiar with the original 224. The mix knob is not a true wet-dry control. It simply adds the reverb signal to your original signal. If you turn it all the way clockwise, it swaps over to full wet at the very end of the range. But just before that, it maxes out at 50-50 wet-dry. So say for instance, you want to set up the reverb so you get almost all reverb with just the faintest hint of your dry signal. It's not possible to do that with just the pedal. You're limited to 50-50 wet. Thankfully, they do provide the full wet mode, so you can use the reverb as a send and mix it in however you want from there. But it would be nice to have that level of control within the pedal without having to rely on external gear. So I delayed working on this review because I knew an app was coming out and I wanted to include it. While UA hadn't promised any new features, I thought surely they would do something cool with it. Nope, you just use it to switch the trails mode. No preset saving or management, no cool control mode or creative use at all. Again, to be fair, UA didn't promise or even mention any additional functionality with the app. I guess I was just hoping they would have done something more inventive or fun with it. It's not every pedal that has a Bluetooth connection to open up some creative possibilities. But nope, it's completely utilitarian. I guess there's always the possibility of an update. I try not to let outside opinions influence my reviews, but it's impossible to ignore all the gasping and pearl clutching that went on when the UAFX pedals were announced. This always happens when UA announces anything. A bunch of people think it's their duty to rush to their keyboards and announce their negative opinions about it. Yet another Apple parallel. But while you can find plenty of whining online about UA's pricing and their DSP-based platform, you won't find anyone complaining about the sound. UA's emulations are objectively and unanimously considered to be excellent, and that trend continues here. This reverb sounds exquisite. That being said, $400 can be a tough pill to swallow. Whether it's worth it to you is going to completely depend on your use case. If you're going to be using this in a band, like in a live setting, anything heavier with dense arrangements, the fidelity of the reverb is going to get lost in the mix. In those situations, no one would ever know the difference between this and any of the million available sub $200 digital reverb pedals. In that case, it may not be worth it to you. However, if you are working in more sparse arrangements, or especially in a studio setting, the quality of this class-leading reverb will be apparent. And I want to be clear, while the focus of this channel is usually synthesizers, this is an excellent reverb for any studio use. Vocals, drums, guitars, doesn't matter. If you wanted a good reverb for mixing without having to deal with the UAD DSP universe, you could absolutely use this pedal as a send in a professional mix. It's the real deal. If you can get over the sticker shock, this is definitely a case of you get what you pay for. And if you need studio quality reverb in the pedal format, I would absolutely recommend the Golden Reverberator. If you'd like to hear more of the Golden Reverberator on synths with no talking, click on the Sounds Only video link. If you enjoyed this content and want to see more synth and audio production related content in the future, please like and subscribe.